This week, the opposition really focused on infrastructure issues. Matthew O'Toole was in the chamber this week for the opposition day, and on Tuesday, the Assembly debated a number of motions which were focused on infrastructure. So, first motion was on the establishment of an infrastructure commission, which was basically looking at how we can improve how we build things in Northern Ireland. And then the other one looked at NI water funding and governance. So, of course, as you know, the wastewater network, particularly as the housing crisis escalates, has come under more scrutiny. The model by which we fund Northern Ireland water. But something that we're asking today is, because Hill Street was in the headlines this week as well. And for anyone outside of Belfast, and I promise you we're not going to be Belfast-centric on the podcast, but I think it is indicative. Liz Kimmins, the Infrastructure Minister, made a statement to the Assembly about Hill Street and its pedestrianisation, which has been long talked about, and it seems to be it isn't coming anytime soon. But it seems that we struggle to build and do even really small things in Northern Ireland. Just whenever that debate in the Assembly, it was on Tuesday, I would urge anyone to go back and look at it. There does seem to be a little bit of helplessness and a bit of hopelessness here that we're actually going to progress any of this. So, Tim, what did you make of Infrastructure Day in the Assembly, we'll call it, but kind of some of the wider discussion around it?
Yeah, we do infrastructure really badly in this country. There's no question of that. And I think it obviously starts with the planning system. It's clearly not fit for purpose. Now, I was thinking about this the last day or so when we're planning these topics out. And I can't remember if Michael was the SDLP SPAD at the time when this happened. So back in, it must be like 2013, 2014, whenever the First Minister and Deputy First Minister had been to America, and they had been told time and time again, we really want to invest in Northern Ireland, but your planning system's broken. We can't do what we need to do in Northern Ireland. So they came back, and this was the charge that was given to the special advisors in OFM, DFM at the time, or the executive offices it's known now. Come up with a way that we can meet these American needs. And what we decided to do was, look, let's bring forward, there was a planning bill was going through the Assembly at the time. It was Mark H. Durkan was the Minister. Let's bring forward an amendment to that planning bill where the First and Deputy First Minister, acting jointly, can designate an area, can designate a building site, can designate a project as being outside of the normal planning rules and regulations, and that can then go ahead quickly in those exceptional circumstances. Now, it also limited judicial reviews and all that sort of thing that could have been taken at that time. Now, that was put forward, and so objectionable was that to the SDLP, who are now telling us our infrastructure system's broken and that we can't get anything done. So objectionable was that to the SDLP that they pulled the whole bill, and they just simply binned the planning bill and said we're not going to do it because that just flies in the face of what we want to see. So the SDLP, going back over 10 years now, blocked something I think would have made Northern Ireland economically adept, would have actually made this place quite attractive for people to come and invest, because we could have put through planning projects very quickly. Casement Park, interestingly, of course, I mean, if that planning procedure had been in place and you could have cooked up some deal in and around the time of all the stadiums being paid for, Casement Park could have been ring fenced. Casement Park could have gone through. There would have been no judicial reviews. It would have been built. The money would have been spent. We wouldn't have been in delay, and we wouldn't be in the position that we're in. So, I don't know. Maybe Michael, I don't know if you were the SPAD at that time when that was vetoed.
Tim, I think you know full well who the special advisor was at the time. So, Michael, it's all your fault.
Right. Well, that's disappointing because, I could go into that. Yes, I was around, and I can go into why that was rightly rejected. But I'd start where Tim started. We are dreadful at infrastructure in Northern Ireland, and we have been for decades. And it's not, sadly, Tim, one person to blame, Mark Durkan, because he didn't pass your power grab bill. You can go back to, Mark, it's not Liz Kimmins, it's not John O'Dowd, it's not Peter Robinson, it's not Conor Murphy, it's not Danny Kennedy. We can have all these infrastructure ministers and try and blame them. It's not their fault. A big problem is the planning system, which needs root and branch reform, not some DUP-inspired power grab so they can get their pet projects through, without even, for people who really love using the law to get ahead. They wanted to ban judicial review, take away the right to object to anything in the
Not
courts.
not ban.
Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in that. I don't want to get bogged down in that.
No, it's great. I love it. I love it.
In that relative distraction. Again, a bit like the Sex Pistols, my memory goes back a little bit further, and I would start with the privatisation of NIE, which the civil servants were no match for the privateers who wanted to buy the assets, and they sold them for half nothing, and the private sector made an absolute bomb out of them, and then in came devolution, Trimble Durkin devolution, Trimble Mountain or whatever, and they realised our civil servants are no match for private contractors when it comes to negotiations, including on major projects or sales of assets. So they set up this thing called the Strategic Investment Board, SIB, and that was meant to be what this week is now described as an infrastructure commission. Is that what they're calling it? It was meant to guide ministers and government, take them by a hand, and deal with these nasty private sector people and bring in people who were experienced, hard-nosed commercial people who would get the best possible value for the government, for the executive, as it pursued this big programme of investment that it had in front of it. Sadly, what happened was the civil service saw the implied criticism of them in the establishment of this new body, and after a couple of years of reviewing it to death and bullying it and bringing it right into the centre so they could open its mail virtually, they effectively neutered it as an organisation, and it's going on now. It's trundling along, and it's involved in projects where they're welcome and they're providing the wee bits of expertise here and there, but the original vision's gone. And they're not carrying out that particular role. So and they have actually been involved in some of our biggest infrastructural catastrophes, project catastrophes, in recent years. You know, like it comes to mind the Struhl campus that's gone on forever and ever and ever in Oma. Well, that's an SIB project. So that has all failed. Our system failed. Tim mentioned the planning system. That has failed. And also we apply Treasury regulations to the letter, regulations that are meant to deal with massive things like HS2, and we're applying them to somebody building an extension to a shopping centre. It's ridiculous, and I don't know if it'll ever be gripped. And if Tim wants to focus in on 1 year when the power grab was rejected, that's fine. But there's no individual to blame. There is, the entire system needs completely rearranged by agreement.
I think Michael's given a really great overview there of how the system's broken. We might actually have agreement on this podcast. Not for the first time. I think we've agreed before. Look, the system is broken, and Michael is absolutely right. Civil servants, we gum up the system. They're so cautious. They're so afraid of challenge. They're so afraid of making one step out of line that we just see time after time after time. Roads can't be built. Half of our city centre is bought up by one company that wants to make this massive development in the Cathedral Quarter, completely stalled. There's no one forcing their hand. There's no one saying either put up and do the development that you've said you're going to do, or we're going to take the land off you and we're going to do some development there. There's no threat in the system. There's no oversight in the system. There's nobody driving the system. There's nobody keeping a check on the system. You know, we're still waiting for York Street interchange. I mean, time and time again, we've been told there's money for that, and then it never happens because we just have a massive can't do mentality. And you know, like, I'm going to raise the bridge, and you know, you're going to ridicule me for that, and that's fine.
Oh Christ!
But whether you support the bridge to Scotland or whether you don't support the bridge to Scotland, I'm a massive advocate.
I thought it was a tunnel. No, did it not become a tunnel? Bridge,
infrastructure to Scotland. Let's call it that. Bridge, tunnel with a little roundabout in the Isle of Man,
ferries,
whatever way you want to do it. I think that's a challenge. I think that's very problematic. I think it's going to be hard to do, but why do we not have ambition? Why can we not dream? We can't dream in this place. Because people always say, but the hospital up the road's under pressure. Yes, the hospital's up the road's up the pressure. Big infrastructure projects aren't either or. You know, that's how you can do big infrastructure projects, because people are allowed to dream. People are allowed to move those projects forward in novel, in new, in different. Big infrastructure projects can only be delivered if they're delivered outside of the system. And, you know, Look at the tram in Edinburgh and the whole hoo-ha over that, and done inside the system. It was criticised, it was ridiculed. Now people in Edinburgh love the tram, and it's been extended. What should have been done at the start? And we can't do that here. We can't even get a bus to go to Newton Abbey and carry duff, for goodness sake.
I know,
because everything's gummed up.
So this is the issue, though. I mean, okay, like, without treading on your and Lee Reynolds' big dream of a tunnel to Scotland. In terms of I take your point about big infrastructure being inconvenient. The Lewis in Dublin is another case in point. I mean, when the Irish government were building that in the 90s, it was massively ridiculed, wasn't going to work, and half the Dublin city centre was being tore up to build it. And literally, the big part of the consensus was that the Lewis would be a big flop. And now, literally, every time there's a general election, they're all fighting over where they're going to extend it to, because more places in Dublin want to be connected to the Lewis network. The tram in Edinburgh is also another really great example of that. But in terms of, you're very critical there of the civil service, right? But I was kind of thinking as you were listening, that's why we have political masters. I mean, the civil service in the Republic is cautious. The civil service across the water is cautious as well. But they do have political masters above them saying, no, we're going to go and do this. We are going to go and put this in place. So what's the issue here? Why can't a minister here do the same thing?
Mandatory coalition. They don't have that in Dublin. They don't have that in London. They don't have that across the world. And I think that's a big problem as well. Yes, the political class is a problem because they're not driving these things forward. But I think built in to the system, baked into the system, is this mandatory coalition that gums things up as well. So civil servants say boo, and then things just drag in the civil service. A minister may try to move that forward, may try to push that forward, but if they don't have the entirety of the executive singing in unison on the one infrastructure project, that's still not going to go forward.
Yeah.
And we have the problem. Here's the problem with the political class. It's, well, you're getting your bridge. Why aren't we getting our tunnel? You're getting your stadium. Why are we not getting our hospital? And so everything is seen within that lens of you're getting, we get. And until we get out of that, I think infrastructure is going to be gummed up as well.
But I also think, though, Michael, just to say about, if you can comment on the political, but also I think another problem with the infrastructure debate, and again, this is I think more than a fair criticism, is the east-west divide on infrastructure in Northern Ireland. The west of Northern Ireland does not have great roads, public transport, you name it. It just doesn't have good anything in that respect.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably inevitably always going to be the case to some extent between the more urban and the more rural areas when it comes to infrastructure. But to add a little bit of balance, the civil servants have successfully managed road programmes. You hear about the A5, but a lot of roads do get done. A lot of bypasses get built. The A8 to Larne got built. In budget and time and so on. And it's not just executive projects. The North-South Interconnector, a vital energy infrastructure project, has been gummed up for years and years and years, and that's got nothing to do with the executive. What is worrying about the executive is, as Tim mentioned earlier, and I agree with pretty much all he was saying there, is that they appear to have given up on it. They appear to just be resigned to the fact we can't do this stuff, and I wish it would go away, because what they used to have, even in SIB, even when they were pretending they were in charge of something, they used to produce an investment strategy for Northern Ireland that listed the priority projects and set them out with a little bit of detail, and you could see that if we had the money, here's the things we would do. That has run into the sand. The latest ISNI document, when Paul Givan was short-lived First Minister and Michelle O'Neill was Deputy, they put an ISNI, an investment strategy document, out to consultation. Didn't mention any projects hardly in it, and it was supposed to return from consultation in April 22. It's just sat there. And if you go to the SIB website, that's it. That's the latest document. A draft consultation paper from 2022 that says nothing. They've given up. And it's very, very sad, because there has to be a solution.
Okay, well, we'll be, this time 2 years, we'll be running toward the Assembly election, which is penciled in, I think, for the 6th of May, 2027. So, and the local elections will be on the same day, so we'll be hotly, I think, infrastructure because of the housing crisis, which will
And
definitely be coming
transport,
back.
David,
Transport,
I mean,
everything.
we've got this big,
Yeah.
we've got this big hub, and we've built this new bus network, the Glider, and we've built this massive big hub for transport, and the big bus doesn't go to the transport hub. Only in Northern Ireland, only in Northern Ireland would that happen. I mean, it just blows my mind. It really does. But anyway, I've done enough rant done for one day.
I just think look, it's politics, but look, 2 years coming up now because we're now more than halfway through the mandate and we're coming into the last few laps of it. Really, I think that's going to be a big issue. I think I was just thinking about this the other day because water and housing are just so linked together. I just think if this is a big issue in 25, fast forward 2 years, it's going to be an even bigger issue. So I'm interested to see whether, because housing has been something in other countries that has moved voting behaviour in quite big ways. So be interested to see here.
And well done to the SLP for raising this. I mean, we've been quite critical of the opposition. And I think this is the narrative. I think if I was advising them, this is the narrative I'd stay on. You people cannot deliver the big things because you're too busy squabbling. Well, you can't provide direction. That's the narrative I'd stay on. If I
wouldn't. I would often keep. I would actually just even keep it. Yeah, fair play to the SDLP for focusing on this, but also I would actually keep it relatively low level. The more people talk about things like Hill Street and things like that, the small things, because I think it's. You know, Albert Reynolds, the former Taoiseach, in his resignation speech, gave that famous line about, you know, it's the small hurdles in politics that trip you up. It's never the big ones.
We can't even put in two bollards, one at one end of the street and one at the other end of the street. I mean, that's where we're at.